Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Linda Armstrong here. Today is Friday, August the 31st, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, your second daily dose of happy for the day. And August is coming to a close. It has come to a close. This is it. It's the last day of August. It's like this is the Labor Day weekend coming up. That's the unofficial end of summer here in the U.S., and I can't hardly believe it. What happened to summer, Linda?
I don't know. Like when you said that, it hit me. This is the end of the month.
Well, like what? What happened?
Yeah.
It's crazy how that happens. But hey, that doesn't matter. Hey, at least we're doing good. We're the weekend's here. We got a 3-day weekend coming up. Lots of people looking forward to it. People traveling, going away, having fun, going to the beach, all kinds of good stuff. So that's the way we're going to look at it today. How you doing, Linda? I mean, we haven't talked in a week, but I hope your week's been a good one.
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I've actually been off from my karate school this week, and I didn't really book any sessions. So I've had a nice week of getting caught up on things within my home.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good thing to do, just to resettle everything, make everything feel good. Yeah. So we're talking today about light working because you posted something on Facebook about what is a light worker, and I thought that was a very good question because I didn't have a darn clue what a light worker was. So okay, well, yeah, let's find out what a light worker is. I figured that'd be kind of fun.
So that was actually, just like a teaser for the video I put out on my YouTube channel today, which is, what is a light worker?
Mm-hmm.
And are you one? So light workers, first of all, I believe we're pretty much all light workers. So light worker is someone who works with light. Well, what is light? Light is that love of the universe, love and light. Okay. So it's the energy of the all that is, source energy, whatever you want to call it. So like when I do my healing work, I'm totally channeling that energy. I work with the light, and I help people become lighter within themselves and release all those burdens, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So But you don't have to do what I do to be a light worker. For me, the way I look at it, a light worker is anyone who comes from their heart and brings love to a person, a situation, whether it's in their field of work, helping people to, doctors, it could be anything, really. Anyone who's helping somebody in their life by bringing this light to them to help them is a light worker.
Okay.
So what you're doing twice a day, you're bringing light to whoever wishes to listen.
Mm-hmm, that's true.
Yeah.
And I'm enjoying every moment of it too.
Right. Because you're swimming in the energy.
Yeah.
And that is the light.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That is true. Yeah. All right. Well, that's a good definition. I like that. It had to be something along that line, I guess. But when I first saw the word,
sums it up.
Yeah.
But, the funny thing is, like you said to me before we started, I don't know, I never heard of that. Well, I didn't hear of it either. I've always been a light worker. I've always been someone who uplifted people and could bring a lot of energy to motivate and bring energy up to a situation, a room, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know this term light worker. And I remember in my first law of attraction energy, my first coaching academy, this kind of was coming up, this thing about being a light worker. And I'm like, I had no clue. I had to look it up. I had to do a little research. I had to watch a few videos. I'm like, oh my God, I'm a light worker. I know it.
Well, it's an interesting term. It's certainly a very different term from what we normally use to describe ourselves or others in daily conversation. It's not like, we meet on the street. Hey, Linda, how you doing? How's the light working going? It's just not part of our normal repertoire, right? Yeah. So it kind of catches your attention when you first see the word and you say, well, light worker. Light worker. What is that?
And when you get deeper into it, like, and you'll see more of this in the whole spirituality world, is that, light workers are those souls who chose to come here at this time to help uplift humanity, right? So that's why, for me, you can be a light worker to any degree, as long as you're trying to, make things better in the world.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But, it's like we've chosen, because you don't remember, your pre-birth planning of what you chose to do in this life, but you wind up carrying it out in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I always worried about that. I mean, because they tell us that, right? They tell us that we came here with like a plan. We already had an intention when we got here, but for whatever reason, we don't know what that reason was. And I keep thinking, is this crazy or what? I mean,
No. It's in my world. It's real. It's just that most of the time, a lot of people are unconsciously doing it. But those who like awaken, the spiritual awakening, it's awakening to know the fullness of who you really are, which is way more than this body that's walking around the planet. You
mhm.
come here with a lot more than that, and your energy is far more expansive than that. So
Well, I think
there,
that's great, and I think that's true. I'm just looking at the part of it that says, well, we don't really remember exactly why we came here, and that's the part I'm thinking, why wouldn't we want to? I mean, what is it that makes it so important for us to cut off the memory? That's the part I don't quite get. I've heard various explanations for it, and
well,
they all have some degree of plausibility, but even so, it's like, doesn't that seem like tying your hand behind your back?
but we came here for the experience, right? For the growth. The challenges are all part of that. Like, how are you gonna? What are you gonna take from that? Are you gonna resent it the rest of your life, or are you gonna grow from it?
No, no. I mean, I don't see any reason to resent it. It just seems it's
No,
curious.
but
It's a curiosity.
some people get stuck there. But so anyway, getting back to that, like there's a book. This book, I love this book. It's called Your Soul's Plan, and I'll find it on my Audible so I can tell you who wrote it. I forget his name. Rich Schwartz. Let me see. Robert Schwartz. Your
Okay.
Soul's Plan. Discovering your pre-birth planning. And did I tell you about this book already?
I don't recognize it. No, so I'm going to go
Okay.
with no.
All right. So this whole book speaks to exactly what we're talking about right now. And this guy who wrote the book had his own spiritual awakening, and he started working with other people to help them to heal in their life, and found that somewhere along the line, he got hooked up with a bunch of these different mediums who can actually see pre-birth planning. So like this, there's probably 12 stories or so in the book about people's real life experience and how even without them knowing it, they came to an understanding of why it happened and how it had them grow in their life.
Hmm.
Right. uh, yeah, I don't want to give away any stories. Okay. No,
That's all right.
I've listened to the book 3 times now, so it doesn't matter if I tell you some of the stories. But I mean, there's one where this woman was, basically blown up from a pipe bomb in her boss's mailbox,
Ouch.
and she actually shouldn't have survived, but she did. She went on to be a speaker who helped so many people that have gone through tragic and traumatic experiences such as hers
Hmm.
to go on and live a beautiful life.
Hmm.
Now, she didn't hold resentment, not even for the bomber.
Which is really something.
Yeah, and like that kind of forgiveness came to her while she was still in a coma. She had all this experience with spirit.
Wow.
And so when these mediums hooked up with her, and they don't know her story, they're just doing a reading for her. They saw the whole thing. They saw that she was going to forgive these people. They saw that this would be a catalyst for her helping millions of people. And there are a lot of stories like that. There was one story in the book where this girl was actually a victim of incest, rape from her father, right?
Mm. Wow.
And she actually forgave her father. This is her real life story.
Hmm.
But when they went to the pre-birth planning, they hooked in and they saw how she was asking her father to play this role for her, because we have soul families, right? So like the souls meet. It's a big gathering, and you're deciding what it is you want to experience in this life, and then all the players in it, like we all agreed to it. There's no chance. So she was asking this soul, her father's soul, to be the one who would do this to her, and he was refusing. And she said, no, I really need to learn this. This is something that I have to do this. And I need it to be you. And so he said, well, I will only play this role for you if you forgive me in this life, in that same lifetime. And she actually did. So it's pretty fascinating. It answers a lot of questions that people have about the in-between life, or, like, why did I choose this? Or,
Well, it also
like,
raises questions too. I mean, what a thing to choose to come into life to do.
well, what a brave soul.
Well, brave,
And,
yeah, that's one word.
but the other part of it is because of there's healing to be had, not only for herself, but for other people around her, right? I mean, there's always a purpose for it, but we might not understand it. Like, I still don't know completely why my sister chose to die during this past year at the age of 51.
Really? Wow.
You know,
Yeah.
2 times with breast cancer and looking like she's doing great, wound up passing in like a week's time.
Mm.
But I know that that's how she needed it to be for her, because she wasn't going to give up. So it had to kind of take over her real fast, almost without her knowing it.
Mm.
And it's very interesting. So actually, I think she's just teaching unconditional love, because there's been a lot of things that have been happening since then that you really need unconditional love for. So,
Wow.
yeah. Yeah. I think what got me first, and I don't know where our topic is anymore, but it made me think of how.
I'm not really sure either. We started off with light working, and now all of a sudden, whoa.
Because we're all, why? Because we're all light workers. We're all here to help the humanity grow.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was going to share a story, and I didn't get this at the time. Okay. Like now I can use the word God, and I have an understanding for the word God. But when I was growing up, I didn't, because I felt like it was being forced down my throat, and I really rejected and resented being forced to go to church and do all these things.
By the way, I have to mention, it's amazing to me just how often I hear that story. That was my story too. I have talked to so many people who have that same story. It doesn't get any play in mainstream society, but oh my goodness, there are a lot of people who have that experience.
Yeah, and some people won't even admit it out loud,
Oh yeah, sure. Sometimes for good reason.
But so I wanted to say there was this we had a karate student, a 5-year-old girl who got a brainstem tumor, and looked like she was going to do okay, but she wound up dying after 2 years at the age of 7. So at the time, I remember thinking I was really pissed off at God. I'm like, there's no God. How does God let 7-year-olds die of brainstem tumors?
Sure,
that kind of a thing.
Right.
But what I realized once I started opening up spiritually and doing all of these courses and learning all the things I know now, early on in this journey that I'm on now, it hit me because I remembered that at her services, so many people got up and spoke about how much they learned through her journey. Even her parents, like that was like comforting. That is like everyone, and they had a lot of friends, a lot of family. Everyone who came in contact with her was uplifted by her while she was dying. So it made me think, oh my God, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I'm getting goosebumps right now as I say it. She came here for that experience to teach those lessons to all those people, because we were all forever changed.
Wow. I don't know I have no idea what to even say to it other than wow. That's it. Just wow.
Yeah. But that made me be able to say, oh, okay, God, so maybe it wasn't your fault. Maybe we choose things to live in this life, or maybe there's a purpose to all things. Like that's when I first started really understanding that there's a purpose to all things, because I could see, it's like I could consciously, logically connect the dots from that experience and see how much good came from it. Yeah.
It's really something. I mean, that's one of the things that Abraham tells us about very frequently, how they explain how the law of attraction works. They explain that we attract everything into our lives, both positive and negative. And eventually they get to the point in their explanations where they say, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to get to the point, we here in this physical plane, we're trying to get to the point where we're feeling good about everything that's happening, even the stuff that we normally don't like. And by feeling good, it's not that I feel good that the bad thing happened, but feeling good around it, so to speak. Finding other things going on around it. And that plays into that. But boy, oh boy, that's a hard message when you're faced with like a 7-year-old dying from cancer and producing this story where everybody was uplifted by it. Like that's a hard one.
But I tell you what, it was that understanding that made it so much easier for me during my sister's experience. And I was able to be there with her for like all of that time and help her have an easy transition. You know, if I didn't have this understanding before, I would have probably been in a different space, and I would have been sending her this energy of, resenting that she's dying and all this kind of, who knows what, I didn't have that. I was very much able to be in that energy of peace as she had went through whatever she went through at the end there.
Yeah.
and I was able to hold that space for the friends, the family. Otherwise, I think everybody would have just been falling apart. But we were good.
Well, perspective is everything, and it's got to be also true with the difficult situations where a loved one dies and it feels like they really shouldn't have died, and
Yeah.
the loss that you feel in that kind of situation is acute and intense. I mean, those are the times when we need it most. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. But sometimes you can almost look at it like you're being selfish because you want them to be there for you in your life, but they had a different plan that they needed to fulfill. So it's kind of like, you're only hurting because you have the absence of something that was within your life, right?
Oh yeah, it's the absence that you're
Yeah.
focusing on. If you weren't focusing on the absence, you wouldn't feel the pain.
Right.
I mean, that's one thing that I've learned, and I learned that actually with Louise, because there was an incident a couple of years ago, which I've related a few times here on the podcast, where her stepmother died, and shortly after that death, Louise was in really a rough place because it was a day when she would normally have called her. She usually called her once a week, and now she couldn't call her, and it was overwhelming her, and the pain and the loss and all that was really, really difficult. And I kind of stumbled upon by accident. Well, actually, at the time I said by accident. Now I think I was probably just inspired. But
Absolutely.
but I got this inspiration to just go over, kneel in front of her, literally, because where she normally sits in the living room, and
Mm-hmm.
say to her, looking her right in the face, I never really asked you this before, but what was it you loved most about Ruth? Ruth was her stepmother.
Mm-hmm.
And when I asked that question, within seconds, there was a huge transformation on Louise's face. Her whole attitude about it changed. She started feeling better. She started telling me about what she loved about Ruth. And
Yeah.
within minutes, all of the pain was gone.
Right.
Just because
Yeah.
she focused on the love rather than on the loss. And I realized, wow, I just stumbled upon something pretty cool here. And Louise, of course, is a former psychotherapist. She was saying to me, well, congratulations, you just figured out a way to skip all 6 steps of grieving.
You absolutely did.
You went right to acceptance.
And you know what's cool about that is because then when she's holding that higher vibration, she can feel Ruth
Mm.
with her.
Hmm.
Because spirit, after you pass, you don't have the body anymore. You're just this pure love energy. You're a very high vibration.
Mm.
So I'll share a cool story happened to me this week. Actually, just the other day, I even posted that on Facebook, on my page. So my sister, one of the big signs, normally I can feel her. I can connect to her. I can kind of have conversations with her when I'm meditating. Like I can feel her around. I have that ability. But recently I haven't been feeling her around that much. And her sign is, her most often sign is ladybugs. I haven't had any ladybugs. I'm like, what the heck's going on here? My cousins are posting ladybug sightings. Joanne was with me today. I'm like, well, I'm not having any signs. So I told her, I'm like, listen, Joanne, I'm not getting any signs. What's up with that? You got to send me something, right? I'll tell you a funny story. Because I told you we're doing work around my house today, right? So we had this tarp that was covering up a whole bunch of stuff that we cleaned it all out. And now the tarp was all dirty. So I'm cleaning off this big, huge tarp in my backyard. And my husband had just cut the grass and there's not a bag on it. So the grass clippings are all over. So there's, my sandals, my feet were full of grass.
Yeah, that's
So
always fun.
I hose off. I take the sandals off. I hose them off. I hose my feet off. They're nice and clean. I put the sandals to the side. I go in the house. I wipe my feet because they're a little bit wet, and I go over to my computer to start working. And then I feel something under my foot. I'm like, what could that be? It doesn't even feel like a pebble, but I don't know what that, like a piece of dirt. I'm like, what is this? I picked my foot up. There was a dead ladybug stuck to my foot.
Ah.
Now, it wasn't there when I rinsed my feet off. Somewhere it came, so I guess maybe you could say you stepped on, but I wiped my feet really good coming into the house. Like, I don't know, but it doesn't even matter how it gets there. It doesn't have to make sense. Here's this ladybug stuck to the bottom of my foot. I'm like, all right. And, and I'm like, all right. So my sister had to make a point that she's still around because here I'm going to put this ladybug not flying around, not landing on some flower or next to your car, under your freaking foot you were just walking on.
Where you couldn't miss it. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So that was fun. So the point of me telling you that is that, sign, we're spirit. we're all connected, and you can receive signs from people who have passed. I've done a couple of videos about that kind of thing on my YouTube channel. So where are we? Light workers?
Yeah, well, we started off with light workers. We went way off on an interesting tangent, and then we ended up with a ladybug sign from your late sister. So we're kind of jumping all over the place here. I keep going back to something that it tied in with my conversations with Tom during this morning's podcast. I've seen these posts today that, and I found them in Law of Attraction group, so that there was a very definite context to them. And they were posts from people who were, for the most part, hostile to the concept of the law of attraction, which in and of itself is interesting. Why do you bother to go into a law of attraction group if you don't even care about the darn thing?
Yeah.
And it became fairly clear to me that they were there in some sense to stir up trouble, trolling a little bit, that kind of thing. But what was also interesting about it, because I interacted with them, and the first question somebody might ask is, well, why did you even bother? And to be honest, half the time I'm not even sure myself. But I know on a certain level, I always am interested in finding out why people do what they're doing. What's making them tick? I mean, I like knowing what motivates people. I like knowing what inspires people. To me, that's how I get to know people. And I'm not really afraid in any way of talking to somebody who's really on a completely different wavelength from me. It doesn't bother me that much. It's more of an intriguing thing. Like, I want to understand why you're on such a different wavelength from me.
Right. Sounds like curiosity.
It is curiosity. Yeah. So I engaged with them and was trying really hard not to be offensive. I mean, I was sticking with my viewpoint, of course, but I wasn't, shoving it down their throat or anything like that.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to just experience well, there was a degree of pushback, but there was also them kind of jockeying. Each one of them in their own way was trying to push their own little agenda and so forth, which is fine. That's normal. But just where they were doing it and how they thought about it. Each one of them posted something. I like doing this kind of thing because if I do it the right way, if I do it in the way that's most effective, I can get a person to explain to me what their thought process really is. And in every single one of their cases, when they wrote their thought process out, it was like I was reading gibberish. I mean, from their perspective, it made total sense. But from my perspective, I'm thinking, WTF? I mean, what's going on here? I don't understand a word they're saying. I mean, the words, I know all those words. I've seen them, strung together. But when they string together this way, it just doesn't connect with me at all. What is going on? Now, I'm not even sure how to tie that into what we're talking about, but I just keep going back to it. Why is it that somebody goes into a group that's on a topic that they're hostile to and then puts out ideas that were drawn from them because I was encouraging them to do that, and those ideas make no sense to me? Why? What's going on there? I don't know.
I can tell you one reason, because you're on two different vibrational planes.
Well, that's true. Yes, that has to be true.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just fascinating to me.
It's not gonna resonate or make sense with you because it doesn't exist in your experience.
Well, one of them actually I could identify with to an extent because where she is at is somewhat similar to where I used to be at. Not totally, but there's a certain similarity to it. And where she's at right now is basically, if I had to really, really cut it down to a nutshell, it's in like conspiracy theory territory. So, there's this big conspiracy going on of X type, and, they're taking over the world, and there's nothing you can do about it, and, we need to, group together and unite and fight this horrible curse and all this other kind of stuff. So, very angry, very victimized, very much of a victimhood mentality. And I know that mentality because I was there. I've largely grown away from it, but I know, I even wrote a book when I was in that particular mentality. So it's very familiar to me. And yet I found myself, as I'm interacting with her, realizing, well, first of all, and I was pleased about this, just how far away I've moved from that.
Right.
I mean, I now have a completely different perspective from where I used to have. But also, I found myself trying to find a way to connect to her where I remembered it would have been like to be connected to in that space. And
Uh-huh.
and the most fascinating part of that was when I tried to do it, I stopped getting responses from her,
Ah,
which reinforces
really?
what you're saying. I mean, because even when I tried to reach her on where I was pretty sure she was at vibrationally or intellectually or conversationally, just
Uh-huh.
reaching her that way was more than she could handle. It was more
Well,
than she was
actually, because
willing to
maybe
handle.
she might have felt vulnerable because maybe she felt like you can actually see her,
Yeah, but
which is
possibly.
what she wanted in the first place. But then when it came, it's like, oh,
It wasn't
hold
quite what she wanted.
on. Am I ready to go there?
Yeah, yeah. But
You know what?
it's fascinating though.
Let's go to the cards I picked. So I pulled three cards from three different Oracle card decks,
Oh, okay.
and
What now?
I've never
What
done
kinds
this.
of cards are these? I mean, you mentioned that before the show, Oracle card decks. But what is
Yeah.
that?
So an oracle is like, it tells the future in some way, right? An
Oh,
oracle.
okay.
Like, yeah, remember in what's it called? Matrix? There was the
The
oracle.
Matrix.
She
Oh,
could
that's
see.
right. Yeah, the character Nick
Yeah.
called the Oracle. Yeah,
So
she smoked cigarettes. I
there's
always thought that was weird, but okay.
there are so many different decks you can get and cards, that you pick a card and you see what it says. Now I do this a lot of times with like meditation groups, even with clients when they come. I'll have them when they come in person. Sometimes I'll do it online. I'll pick for them, but they pick a card. It always talks. It's always addressing what they're actually coming in for that day. And a lot of times we'll pick a card at the end, and you'll see that the message is totally an answer to the first part. So it just blows my mind. I'll have groups of like 8 people at a time, and we'll pick cards, and the things that come up in the cards, we're just blown away. You could never make it up.
Okay.
So we'll see what this is today. So I picked 3. I just connected with Spirit. I'm like, okay, Spirit, show us 3 cards that I can maybe talk about today on the show.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I didn't even really read them, but I just have them here. So the first one I picked is from a card deck that's called the Enchanted Map, and it's by Colette Baron Reed. So in this deck of cards, there's like, I don't know, 50 something cards, or sometimes 70 cards or something
Mm-hmm.
in a deck. If you pick up the card and you read it and it's upside down, there's a message for the upside down and there's a
Okay.
message for right side up.
Okay.
So this card is called the Magical Map Shifter, and it came in reversed upside down. So what the card is about is Spirit orchestrates everyone's destiny. That's what the theme of this card is. But now we have it in the reverse position. And so in the reverse position, the Magical Map Shifter card may bring you the opposite of what you seek. Perhaps you're in denial about your situation and refuse to see the truth. Or maybe you've been traveling down a path that has constantly led you to a field of poppies where you fall asleep and dream of desires that never find their form. To have the life you really want, you must match its vibrational energy and resonance with it. Sometimes our greatest hurts and disappointments are what awaken us to our need to shift to a higher frequency. If your heart aches because someone is breaking it, this discomfort will lead you to a more authentic life. Don't linger in the pain or blame the magical map shifter for alerting you to the illusion you clung to. Know that the treasure lies elsewhere and can be recovered once you've healed the wound that is reflected in those who've come to you as a catalyst for growth. So, it's talking about really that no experience is a bad experience because it's all leading you somewhere. Okay, but it goes on. So it says, as you experience yourself transforming into the highest version of yourself, you'll come to understand that you're always fortunate when you meet up with the magical map shifter. All right.
Why
So that's
why a map shifter? I'm still not completely clear why the card is called that.
I don't really know why the card is called that. The magic. She named all these. Actually, I don't know the traditional tarot if this is supposed to make sense with that.
I have no idea.
But it's the card that has to do with spirit orchestrating your destiny. So,
Okay.
The map shifter. So if you have like an experience you consider to be a bad experience, but it takes you to a better place, it's the shifting, right?
I guess. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, but that's pretty interesting because we talked about, I mean, for me, it kind of hits a little bit to some of these conversations we had before about, an experience like the little girl dying at 7.
Mm-hmm.
It actually shifted a lot of people's lives in a way that it was very deep and profound for them. You
Yeah,
know?
certain
So,
similarity there. Okay.
yeah. Okay. So then the second card I picked is another Colette Baron Reed. I have like 30 different decks,
Oh,
but
jeez.
these are the ones I had with, because I use them. These are the ones I had with me here at my home because I'm home today. So this one's from a new one of hers called The Good Tarot, and it's Colette Baron Reed. Okay, so this card is going to be a simple explanation. It's called the Ace of Air. It has a really pretty Pegasus on it. Okay, so the Ace of Air, it says destiny and fate, the law of karma, powerful forces of transformation at work, and synchronicity. So it says meaningful coincidences and forces beyond my human control are operating in my life right now for the highest good. Things are happening now with great velocity. I can expect quick results that will lead me forward with excellent information. So I don't know what you're feeling from that, but right away, what I get is, again, like sometimes things are happening in your life and you're thinking it's the worst thing that could possibly happen. But it isn't until like 5 years later when you look back at it, you're like, wow, that was the best thing that could have happened. But when you're going through it, you don't always see it. Like, yeah, like I didn't see what good could ever come from this little girl, Jenna, passing away. And even some things going on in my life right now don't necessarily, I know that it's going to lead. So I don't have to get crushed over some stuff because I know it's leading me to somewhere better. I have that understanding. I've seen it enough times to know that it's real. But when you don't know that, it's hard going through some stuff.
Oh yeah, it's quite uncomfortable because you're basically dealing with this particular situation is playing in a certain way that I don't like, and supposedly there is some great thing that's going to come out of it, but I sure can't see it, and until I can see it, I don't feel good about it.
Yeah. No, I know. Yeah, totally. Yeah. I've got something going on like that right now, but as things like, and it's funny because it's like, and I did a video on this recently. I don't know if we talked about that, but when you're so close, sometimes when something good is going to manifest, it's when you feel like it's the worst spot you could possibly be in. You can't see it, but if you still stay on that path, it'll show up for you. You'll be led in the right place. I know that's hard to believe sometimes, but I've seen it and I trust it. So now with some things that are going on with me personally, we had something happen a week ago. And I'm like, oh my God. Instead of getting crushed, I was like, all right, that's good. That's good. It was like, it could have put the nail in the coffin on a certain situation. It didn't happen. But if it were to, I was like totally cool with it. A lot of people would be crushed.
So you're describing a level of acceptance that was perhaps an unusual level of acceptance.
Totally. It's like, you know what? Why fight it? Something there. It's like spirit wants to lead you in another direction, and you can go screaming and pulling your hair out and tugging at the chains or whatever. But you know what? You're gonna get there. So you might as well, it's like letting go of the oars, right? And going with the flow, right? Downstream.
Well, that's a very interesting point to raise because I was thinking about this whole idea of resistance and letting go of resistance. Again, tying back to my conversation with Tom this morning, but also based on what you're talking about there. I mean, you've raised a few different topics, all of which involved resistances and opportunities to let go when it wasn't so comfortable to let go, even very, very uncomfortable to let go. And yet, as I look at it, that's the way it usually is. I mean, anytime that we have a resistance that we're, something that doesn't feel good, something that's kind of holding us back, and we become aware of it, it's amazing how difficult it is to let go of those things. We just have trouble doing that. And I think it's because we just can't see where the good path is going to be. So, you hang on to what you got, right? You hang on to where you are because you need that comfort level. That's the way it feels. Yeah. And yet, like you're saying, you got to let go of those oars, which is not a comfortable thing to do.
Yeah. And now those two cards, I just pulled them randomly. They tie together. One's talking about, the map shifting to another way, and it might not always be comfortable, or, you might not see. And then, this one. But now guess what the next card is? This is fun.
I'm not sure that I could possibly guess, but go right ahead.
All right. So this is from the Osho Zen Tarot. And this one's usually a little deeper in its explanation. I don't always get it, but we'll see. But this card is playfulness.
Hmm.
Playfulness,
Playfulness.
which would be a solution to all that other stuff with going feeling like you're paddling upstream and things not turning out right. You're not seeing where it could be leading you in a good place, right? Some of that stuff. So,
Yeah.
but
And I can
this,
see, I can actually make a connection there in a sense, because playfulness is a way to be in a space where you let go of the oars. You just want to see how
yep.
it plays out.
So there's two different things that I'm going to read on this. So one is a commentary, and it says, life is rarely as serious as we believe it to be. And when we recognize this fact, it responds by giving us more and more opportunities to play. So it talks about the woman in this card. It shows this very playful, almost clown-like looking person with sparkles all around it. Okay, the woman in this card is celebrating the joy of being alive, like a butterfly that has emerged from its chrysalis into the promise of the light. She reminds us of the time when we were children, discovering seashells on the beach and building castles in the sand without any concern for the waves that might come and wash them away in the next moment. She knows that life is a game, and she's playing a part of the clown right now with no sense of embarrassment or pretense. So it says, when this card enters your life, it's a sign that you're ready for the fresh and the new. Something wonderful is just on the horizon, and you have just the right quality of playful innocence and clarity to welcome it with arms wide open. And then there's one more part to it. It says, the moment you start seeing life as non-serious, a playfulness, all the burdens on your heart disappear. All the fear of death, of life, of love, everything, it just disappears. One starts living with a very light weight or almost no weight. So weightless, one becomes that one can fly in the open sky. So it says Zen's greatest contribution is to give you the alternative to the serious man. The serious man has made the world. The serious man has made all the religions. He has created all the philosophies, all the cultures, all the moralities. Everything that exists around you is a creation of the serious man. Zen has dropped out of the serious world. It has created a world of its own, which is very playful, full of laughter, where even great masters behave like children. So I love that. Because, when you can let yourself get back into that childlike energy, because everything is supposed to be a game, it's so much easier.
Well, yeah, it's easier. There's actually a number of different ways to understand play. I guess probably the most common one would be like playing a game, playing a sport, something like that. Everybody could identify with that. But
Yeah.
when you also look at, say, alternative educational forms, like I don't know if I told you, but Louise and I helped to found a very alternative education system, not system, but school in our area in New Britain, Connecticut.
Mhm.
It's a school where the kids completely run everything. There's
Yeah.
no overall administrators overlooking the thing, and it's actually a model school that Abraham has talked about, much to my amazement, because it's not a very well known model. But one of the key elements that happens within the system is the element of play. Play plays a major role in how kids develop when they're left to their own devices, left to explore things they want to explore in their own way. And play becomes a way of trying things out. So a very common pattern in this kind of school is called a Sudbury Model School. A very common pattern in a Sudbury Model School is for kids to try one thing today and another thing tomorrow morning and another thing tomorrow afternoon and another thing for 5 minutes and another thing for 2 days. And they're just trying a bunch of things until finally, at one point, they hit upon something and all of a sudden they can't stop doing it. And they're just
Mm.
so caught up in playing with it and learning from it and doing it and getting mastery of it and all that kind of stuff. And they keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going until they're done with it. And then they go on to the next thing. So play
Yeah.
becomes a way of exploring the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I wish I had one of those schools around when my son was going to school.
Yeah, you and me both, right?
Yeah. I have a sister-in-law in Ashland, Oregon, who has a school that's, similar to what you're talking about. I
Mm,
cannot think of the name of it right now,
mm-hmm,
but she teaches in that way, from this
mm,
childlike place of
mm-hmm.
wonder, playfulness, and discovery.
It's amazing.
But
I when I was trying to sell parents on sending their kids to the school as we were getting ready to open it, it was before I knew anything about the law of attraction. So I couldn't use any of that terminology. But what I would do is I would describe how every kid, every human being is born with what I called an internal compass. And
mhm,
that internal compass is really what happens when we get into alignment. But I didn't know that at the time, So I just said, well, we have this compass, and if we're allowed to just, go to our own devices, that compass will guide us to everything we need to learn.
right.
And that concept, I mean, you could tell when you were talking to parents. Well, first of all, if they were coming to one of our meetings, they were already somewhat predisposed to it anyway. They weren't totally against the concept. But
Right.
even so, you could see the play. Here's another use for the word play. You could see the play on their faces because on the one hand, it sounded so intriguing, and yes, you could see how that could happen. And on the other hand, it was flying in the face of everything that they understood about traditional education, where you're supposed to be
Yeah.
guiding the kids to what it is that they're supposed to be learning. And
Right.
the conflict is really interesting to watch people work through because that conflict really gets to the heart of the matter when it comes to growth. You were talking earlier about how we come into this life, we often have a plan. Sometimes it's a plan that, sounds crazy to those of us here in the physical world, but we have a plan, such as the little girl who was going to die of a dread disease by the time she was age 7.
Yeah.
Well, how would you possibly plan that without having your own compass to follow? I mean,
Yeah.
who's going to plan that for you? No adult's going to plan that for a kid.
No. Well, the other thing too is we look at kids as if they're young. They could have lived more of existence than we've lived. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're here.
You know,
They're young in terms of this particular incarnation, but you never know what came before.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're wise beyond, we all are. And we do truly know what is best for us. That's why that school you're talking about, I hope it really succeeds because that sounds awesome.
Well, it has succeeded to a certain extent, but it never really took off. It started in the late 1960s, and you'll probably remember during the 60s there was a lot of experimentation, particularly with schools, and most of them fell to the wayside. Most of them never amounted to anything. This was one of the few that actually succeeded. It was based in Massachusetts, just outside Boston, in Framingham, within what's known as the Sudbury Valley. So it's called the Sudbury Valley School. And the model has been used and kind of reproduced in a number of small independent schools around the world. But at any given time, there's usually no more than 30 or 40 of them. So it's not like it's exploded in any way. But there's always been a certain segment, a very small segment of population that was intrigued by it enough to actually do something. So I'm not sure I believe it's ready to explode at any given time, but it has had some reach. It has had some success because some people have tried it.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. I'm not sure where to take the conversation at that point because that came off of the play card, and that was my reaction to the play card. So I'm
Yeah.
not sure where to go with it at that point. But
Yeah. Well, it made me think of a video, and I wish I could remember the title of it. There's this young kid. It was like something about he hacked his school education, like school hacking or something like that.
hmm.
And he's homeschooled, but he's learning all he wants to learn about all of his interests. His parents are helping him with this,
hmm
and this kid was given a TED talk, and he was unbelievable. I have to find that again and share it once more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a common theme. Sudbury schools have a number of things that end up as being the results of kids going through them that traditional schools don't have. Some of the
Yeah.
ones that come to mind, if you go to a graduation at a traditional school, high school graduation, and if you were to take the time to interview the kids who graduated in the class, you find maybe half of them have some idea of what they want to do with their lives. The other half have no clue. The ones who do have some idea, probably 2/3 of them are going to college. And you ask them what they're going to college for. Some of them know, some of them don't. Some are going to, well, I'm going to be like a general major till I figure it out, that kind of thing. So there's not a whole lot of definite clearness of purpose. If you do the same thing at a Sudbury school, now granted, Sudbury schools are much smaller, so we're talking about smaller graduating populations. But if you do that at a Sudbury type school and you ask the graduates what they're planning to do, it's extremely rare to find one who doesn't know. Most of them, because they've had the opportunity to practice and play these things and try things out, have a very clear idea of what they want to do. That's one
Yeah.
that to me is one of the most striking differences between the two. Another one is that because in a Sudbury schools usually don't have lots of money. Well, actually, traditional schools don't either, but Sudbury schools are particularly poor compared to traditional schools in most cases. And as a result, there's a lot of what my wife calls MacGyvering. Remember the MacGyver TV show,
Yeah.
where he
Yeah.
pieced together things in order to accomplish an unusual end with them. Well, that's what happens in a Sudbury school too. And because the kids get so good at MacGyvering, it leads them to the point where when they want to accomplish something as adults, they become really creative in how to get there.
Yeah.
One of the classic stories is of a young lady who was graduating from the Sudbury Valley School, and she wanted to go to college. And I don't think they ever told us what it was she wanted to major in, but she had a very clear idea of what she wanted to major in. One of the staff members recommended to her a school that's actually nearby here. It's near it's actually in the town where two of our friends live, in Middletown, Connecticut, called Wesleyan University. And apparently Wesleyan had exactly the right program for this young lady. The only problem was, and this is where the practical real world creeps in, she was past the application period. It was too late to apply.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing about Sudbury students is they don't care about stuff like that. So she got on the phone and said, "Hi, I want to come to your school." And the person that she spoke to in the applications department said, "Sorry, you're past the application period. You'll have to wait till next year." And so she
Yeah.
called the next day and said, "Hi, I want to come to your school." And the person said, "Well, no, like I told you yesterday, you have to apply next year. You're past the period for application." And the next day she calls up and says, "Hi, I want to come to your school." This goes on for like a month. And eventually the dean of admissions hears about it and says, "Who's that?" And she
Yeah.
calls every day. She wants to apply to come to the school, but she's past the application period. He says, "Well,
They're like, we need her here.
bring her in for an interview. Let's find out who this girl is anyway." And she got accepted and matriculated into the school. Completely not the way you're supposed to do it, but that doesn't stop a Sudbury kid because they have learned to be really self-reliant, independent, forceful, strong, determined people because they had the opportunity to play.
Can you spell the name of that? Because I can't make out what you're saying.
Yes, Sudbury, Sudbury, Sudbury,
Okay.
right? Named
And
after
is
the
that a
Sudbury Valley.
person's name or a town or what?
It's named after the Sudbury Valley, which is
Oh,
southwestern Boston.
okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
a fascinating concept. Really fascinating. It's fun. Like I said, we got to open a school, and I was there for like the very early steps of that school, the first few months. And oh my God, it's fun to watch kids not only practicing that, but it's fun to watch them as they transform from the traditional environment to the Sudbury environment. Because all of them came from traditional schools before we founded the school. And
Uh-huh.
they bring all their stuff with them, right? Because you have stuff from your experience in the public schools. I mean, you come from a place where you have classes. Right? Everybody of the same age is in the same class, and they're studying the same things. And many of the kids who end up in a Sudbury school are the ones who were not fitting in, or were frustrated by the way the whole traditional structure works, or they didn't like homework, or whatever. There's like a whole range of reasons, but nevertheless, they still retain many of those structures that are kind of drilled into you because you just go to a public school. That's what you're used to. And watching them as they were trying to make those structures fit into an unstructured school was almost comical at times. Because I mean, but what's one of the most predominant structures in a Sudbury school? It's that there's a teacher, there's an authority figure. Well,
Yeah.
what do you do when there's no authority figure? Well,
I don't know.
what they end up doing is they look for the first adult they can find, and then they try to get that person to behave like an authority figure, which is what that was me. I mean, that was my role there. And in the Sudbury model, you're taught that as the adult, you're there to be a resource. You're not there to be a teacher. So you're trying to just hold your tongue, bite your tongue, not push any kind of agenda, and wait to be asked for help,
Yeah.
for information, for whatever. In other words, you're not the initiator.
Right.
Well, obviously, you also need to have some kind of process for handling disciplinary problems, and there is a process for that. It's called a judiciary committee, and very early on, like within the first week or two after we opened the school, there was an incident. We were using the facilities of a church, an Episcopal church, and the we had access to like their church school rooms. That's basically where we did our stuff. And one of those church school rooms was a nursery with, you know, nursery cots and so forth. And one of the girls, who was about 11, 12 years old, decided she was going to jump up and down on one of those cots. Well, she broke it. Just went right through it, you know? So now we got this damaged cot. What are we going to do about that? Well, that's what the JC meeting was for, the Judiciary Committee. And now the Judiciary Committee is manned by the kids. And it's not like we had a really big school, so we didn't have a huge a huge supply of kids to pick from. It was a small group, and a couple of the people who were on the Judiciary Committee were her friends, you know, so it was kind of incestuous in that sense. But nevertheless, and on top of that, we never had a Judiciary Committee meeting before. I mean, Sudbury Valley's had it for years, so they already have an established process. They know what to do. We didn't have that. So I went in to help them get the thing started, and you could tell none of them wanted to be there. They all wanted to be out of that as fast as possible. So they spent the next 10 minutes trying to convince me to take over the meeting so that I could solve the situation, dish out the punishment, and we could move on.
Right.
And I refused to do that because that's not what my role is. My role is to be a resource person. But it was so funny to watch them trying every way they could to get me to be the authority figure for them.
Yeah.
And very creative ways of doing it, too. I mean, I can't remember what all of them were at this moment in time, but they were just using, you know how kids can be. They just create all kinds of different scenarios in order to try to get where they want to go. Well, they finally got to the point where they realized he's not going to help us. He's not going to bail us out. We got to figure this one out for ourselves. And they did. They actually figured out what to do. They figured out, okay, well, we got to replace this thing. We can't not replace it. The church is going to kick us out if we do, and we'll lose our school. So we can't do that. So we got to find a way to fix this thing. We don't have enough money. There's not enough money in the budget to fix it. So we got to raise money somehow. And they literally had to work through the whole thing, and they did. They figured out how to raise the money, how to get it fixed, who was going to fix it. They solved the whole problem themselves. That's
great. I bet you once they started getting into the process of solving it, they probably all got really into it.
They didn't actually. Not on that first meeting. Over time, that's what happens. At first, they were still resisting it every step of the way. They were doing it because they had to. They felt like they were being forced into it because otherwise they were going to lose their school. But they weren't jumping in up. You know, oh, I can hardly wait. Let's take the next step. It wasn't like that. That takes a while, especially when you're moving away from a traditional model. But if they came up with
the creative outcome, they must have somehow got into the flow of.
They did. Yes. Yeah. It took some doing to get there, but they got there because it was the first time. You know.
Yeah.
But you're right. After a number of different Judiciary Committee meetings on a variety of different topics, it does get easier for them, and then they just fly with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is really cool.
I like that school.
Yeah, I do too. My saddest moment was when Louise and I had to move away because I had to go help my parents move into a retirement center in Virginia, and we actually stayed in Virginia for nearly 11 years after that. But we had to leave, after like the first 3 months that school was open. That was one of the hardest things I've ever did. However, there was one really, really good thing that came out of it that I want to tell you about. The girl who jumped up and down and broke the crib, she was a really troubled soul. She was in the foster care system, never fit in well with any school, always had terrible grades, was on various medications, basically labeled a sort of a passive-aggressive troublemaker, all that kind of thing. She ended up becoming the president of the school.
Wow.
And she's one of the greatest advocates for Sudbury today. She completely turned her life around.
Wow, that's beautiful.
I was so proud of her, just so completely proud of her. And she did it. I mean, it's not like somebody else did it for her. She did it.
Yeah. So you can almost see how she might have chosen to have that rough start so that she can step into her power.
Having seen it, I can see it now. If somebody had told me that before it happened, I would have been really skeptical. But having seen it, I can see how she set herself up for that and how she ended up leveraging it to produce this amazing result.
Right. Yep. Wise little girl.
Very. Not so little now. She's in her 20s or early 30s. But
she started out.
She did. Little. She did. Yeah. So I'm not sure where to go with that, but I just keep thinking about what's going on with her. I got to get in touch with her one of these days, find out how she's still doing. I hope she's still doing good. I haven't talked to her for a few years. But
well, and so she's ahead of the school, you said? So
she was at that point. She was while she was still in the school. She became the school president, and then when she graduated, she was in that role for a while. I don't think she is anymore, But I mean, that was a few years ago. We started that school we started September 11th, 2002. So 1 year to the day after the attacks. That's when we started the school. And she was with that school for the next 5 or 6 years, something like that. And then graduated and stayed in a supporting role for a few years after that. So, I mean, obviously it's been a few years since she's been involved, but she was there for quite a time.
Yeah. I'm sure it totally molded her life and set her up for whatever it is she's doing.
It certainly made me feel good that I helped to found that school, because I felt like, wow, what a gift we were able to give to her that enabled her to make those massive changes. Because I mean, when you look at the statistics of what happens with kids who are in foster care, particularly the ones who've been in there for a number of years, it's not pretty.
Right.
It's
so
really
you know what?
Not pretty.
I just have to point out another example of being a light worker.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Because
Didn't even know it, did you?
In order to open that school, you had to be a light worker. That was the only thing you had to go on. There was nothing else. You know, you're flying in the face of what society tells you is acceptable where education is concerned, and you're doing it without resources, and you're doing it without credentials, and you're doing it without anything. You're just flying by the seat of your pants.
Well, you totally did it, and it supported for sure that girl, and I'm sure the rest of them as well.
Yeah, because there are a number of kids. I don't know the exact count, but a few dozen kids have gone through that school. So, you know, it may be a very, very small school, but it certainly has impacted some lives in a big way.
Yeah, beautiful.
Now, the only question is, how can we make that more universal, right?
Yeah. Well, maybe eventually we're getting there.
We're getting there.
We're
getting there.
Speaking
of getting there, I just realized we're running short on time, and I want to make sure I get a couple of messages in. Ones that we've been doing each time that we do a show. First one, if you are an existing listener who have been listening to a lot of shows and you're liking it, please support our program of trying to reach out to new people through social media. Because we're trying to leverage the fact that when you post something, it isn't just people who see it. Because of the way everybody's interconnected on social media, people you don't even know about also end up seeing it. So please post something about the fact that you listen to the show, and just include the phrase loatoday.net when you post it. It will make an impact like you don't believe. I mean, since we started doing this over the last 2-3 weeks, something like that, there's been a nice jump in our numbers, and I know it's happening because of that. So it's really paying off. So please, continue to do that. If you've done it, and if you haven't done it, hey, what are you waiting for? Come on, join the crowd. It's really good. Help us out. Help us reach more people. For those who are not yet subscribers, maybe this is the first episode you've ever listened to, please become a subscriber. It's so easy to do. You just go to the homepage of our website, loatoday.net. All of the instructions about how to do it are right there. And once you're done, all of a sudden you get all these episodes coming to your phone, to your smartphone or your tablet every single day, every single time that we do them automatically. So those are the two messages. And then the third message is, hey, we'd love to have you call in sometime. Again, the instructions are right on the homepage at loatoday.net. So, hey, give us a call. We don't get too many calls. They don't call very often. But every once in a while we get somebody. And, oh, God, Linda, it's so much fun when we get somebody.
Oh, I would love that. Yeah.
It's great. So, okay, we got about a minute left. Oh, yeah, well, why don't we let you tell about you, too. You have coaching services and you provide energy work. Tell people what you do and how to reach you.
Well, I basically help people clear that subconscious programming that is blocking them from stepping into their full potential to live a life that they love. You can reach me at lovemylife.coach. You can find me on YouTube under Linda Armstrong, Energy Healer, or just email me, linda@lovemylife.coach. I'd love to hear from you.
And I can tell you from personal experience, it's a cool session. It's a lot of fun. I mean, we talked about that one last week, but I mean, I had never seen anything like what you do. Yours is quite novel, quite unique. I mean, I've talked to people and worked with people who are psychic. I've worked with people who are coaches and talked with people who are coaches. I've gotten sessions with people. I've never seen anyone who combines them together the way you do and then tells me afterward, well, I never really thought about myself as a psychic.
I just kind of go with what comes, and I put together whatever I've learned or whatever I'm learning as I'm doing the session, because things will come. Things will come in.
Well, this has been good. One of those topics that kind of meanders all over the place, but it's got some good stuff in it, and I'm glad that we did it. Thanks for doing it, and I look forward to talking to you a week from today, actually.
Thank you. Have a great week, Walt.
Thank you. You do the same, and we hope that you'll come back, too, and keep tuning in every time, because we do these shows not only for us, we do them for you, And we hope that you're getting the most out of them. We want you to have that daily dose of happy, so keep coming.
Right.
And we'll see you all next time as well here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.